There is an adage that suggests you can judge a society by the way they treat their seniors. How do you think the U.S. treats its seniors compared to other cultures? Some use the word elderly. I personally don't like the word elderly. I like the word older adult. I even heard the term seasoned citizen instead of senior citizen. I like that. Here in the U.S., we are a youth-centered society, and we place value in young adults than older adults. Age discrimination is a thing. Perhaps you have seen that or experienced it yourself. And I think we can do a better job in the U.S. with showing respect, consideration, and understanding for our seniors. And you even hear it, even in this current time. We can do better for our seniors. We are getting older, all of us. Not just here in the U.S., but in other countries around the world. They too are dealing with an ever-increasing aging population. And by 2060, demographers project that there will be 94.7 million older adults in the U.S. alone. Think of that. And so many are asking the question, who's going to be taking care of all these people? And how are we going to pay for it? If we're going to continue to get older and older and older. Some countries, I think, are doing a great job caring for their older adults. They're addressing it. Denmark, for example. In order to keep a larger older adult population healthy and independent in the future, Denmark, for the last few years now, have a more efficient type of care which empowers and supports their senior citizens to stay healthy in their homes. I'll post the link below. I thought it was great. It's about a 6-minute video. And I thought, man, good for you, Denmark. And we can learn something from them. And I think countries can start learning from each other because we're in this together. And we can learn and share information in regards to this growing issue. But oftentimes here in the U.S., what is it all about? Profits, money, and how often we see profits over people, profits over safety. All the industries, medical industry, go right on down the line. The greed and the money that we seem to put as a priority. Which leads to this topic, long-term care. You've heard of them, nursing homes, independent living, skilled nursing. We also have these things called greenhouse model homes. They're like communities, like a neighborhood. And there's about 12 residents to a cottage. And it's geared towards patient-centered, home-like care. Patient-centered care, home-like care. And then we also have, which I learned recently, we have them here in Ohio, adult care homes. My neighbor's wife is in one. And they have about 5 people to a home. And they're a lot cheaper than if you had your loved one in a nursing home and you have more of a one-on-one care. And the cost is sometimes by half, as low as $2,500 a month, depending on the level of care. And of course, it could increase up to $3,000 to $4,000. But if you have somebody in a nursing home, you're talking $7,000 plus. And that's not including all of the supplies that they use, the adult diapers and chucks that they put on the beds and whatnot. Quite expensive long-term care. And so you've got people paying either through their insurance, Medicaid, or their private pay. And like I said, it can be very costly. And so you have people, in order to qualify for Medicaid, you have to remember Medicare doesn't pay for long-term care. Medicare is for health-related stuff. Medicare will cover, I know for my father, I believe his Medicare covered up to 100 days skilled nursing care. As long as you're showing improvement, Medicare will cover that. But in order to have long-term care, you have to use Medicaid. And so what happens, or unless you're private paying, but what happens is, to be able to even qualify for Medicaid, you have to spend down, to where now you have people having to spend down their assets. And they're going through their pensions, they're going through their investments and whatnot. So it's important that people talk to an attorney that specializes in estate planning to go through all that whole spend down process. And so you might even be able to then keep certain things, especially if it's a spouse, one person's in the nursing home, the other person's still at home. You can still spend down assets, but still be able to keep a car, keep a house and whatnot. So that's something that you have to talk to somebody about. But something I think a lot of people don't realize is that, okay, so then you finally get to a point where you can qualify for Medicaid for yourself or a loved one for long-term care. But something people don't realize is something called Medicaid recovery. Well, what's that, Jim? Well, so say the person passes away, okay? You have to realize Medicaid has been keeping track of your medical bill and what you have spent. As the expression says, the bill is coming due. After the person's gone, the bill is due. So, yes, the person may have been able to keep certain assets during that spend down process, say a home, and say the children inherit the estate, the property, or a home. Here's the deal. The bill, the Medicaid bill, may be $150,000. So the children either have to put a mortgage on the house or sell the house to go reimburse Medicaid. It's called Medicaid recovery. A lot of people don't realize that. So which leads to this topic of this video. Doing the best we can to stay out of long-term care, keeping yourself and your loved ones out of these care facilities the best you can. And I'm sure people who are listening to this right now, you've experienced either yourself or a loved one who's been in long-term care, and you have your own stories. And I'm sure you could probably lament yourself, I wouldn't wish my worst enemy ever go to one of those places. I'm going to do my damnedest to stay out of those doggone nursing homes. Don't put me there. Don't put me here. As you may hear from a loved one as they screaming and kicking to not have to go into those places. And of course, you can't blame them. So most people would prefer to stay at home. Absolutely. I would prefer to stay at home. They call it aging in place. And so now You've got a lot of agencies out there. That's a big business now. Home health care, visiting angels, comfort keepers, go right on down the list. Or you got private people who provide in-home care, helping with activities of daily living, housekeeping, you name it, to keep people at home, to stay home as long as they can. And then you have home modifications where now they're even building houses already equipped with wider doors, handicap bars in the bathroom, all that stuff. They're already pre-installing it in, so you buy the home, you can continue to age there. It's already set up for you to be able to age and stay in your own home as long as you can. And then, you got the wheelchair ramps and all those things now. We can modify our homes, making it safe for our loved one, picking up rugs and things that they can't trip on. Because one of the biggest things that happen, the statistics on that, falls. And I remember when my dad was home, he always would say, man, I'm always afraid of falling. I'm always afraid of falling. And oftentimes that's the nail in the coffin for somebody to not remain independent anymore. They fall, they break a hip, end up in a hospital, then go to skilled nursing. They don't really recover, and they end up staying and moving over into the nursing home side of the facility. Now, I have some experience with nursing homes myself. And maybe that's the reason why I did this video, because it's something that I do have experience with. My mother, before her health declined, she was an ombudsman volunteer. Well, what's an ombudsman volunteer, Jim? Well, they provide a voice for residents. They go in, they talk to the residents, they observe the conditions, the care, they work with other ombudsman personnel, and then they help with investigating and resolving problems. So my mother did that. And here I was, a kid, and she would take me along with her to this one nursing home. She always just went to this one particular nursing home, and she usually would visit this one gentleman, Walter. And so that was my experience as a boy going into a nursing home. And Walter, he had a hole in his throat. I'm not sure why, but he had the voice box removed, and so he had to use a machine to talk, and he didn't like using it. So my mother and him would talk across the table, writing. So my mom would ask, so, hi, Walter, how's everything going? How's everything, how you doing? And he would write it in a notebook and then pass it over, and my mom would have to read it. Oh, so this and this and this, so you're, oh, blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. And so that's how they communicated, which I thought was interesting. And so there was my first experience. And then here in rural Ohio, growing up, it was a lot of the older population here, older generations, the old-time farmers that were around. And I was influenced by them, and they were friends of my parents, and they would come over and would visit all the time, or we would go down to their places to visit them. And they would say things like, I'll be standing, and they'll say, sit down, Jimmy, Junior. Save your legs for when you're my age. Things like that. Then my mother ended up in a nursing home herself. And I told that story in another video on how she fell, fractured her back, never did walk again. She was keeping me home from school to take care of her. My dad found out. We hired someone to come into the house to take care of her while I was at school and when my dad was at work. And then when I got home, then that aide that we hired would then leave, and then I would take over. And then the needs got to be so great for her. My dad ended up putting her in a nursing home, and I would go and visit her uh, many times a week, almost daily. And she enjoyed being pushed around in her wheelchair outside. She liked to get out of that place, out of that facility, and be pushed around in her chair. And that's a picture of her. You can see how thin she was. That's actually, she came home from the nursing home for a visit. And you could see how much weight she lost and just wasn't herself anymore. And it just broke my heart and how she suffered it in some ways in that nursing home. And just, it was just pitiful to me to watch and see her in that place. And it was in the middle of the night. I'm the one who answered the phone, and they said, "Your mother has just expired." And I didn't understand that term. I never heard it referenced that way. Your mother has just expired. And I had to get clarification, and they explained to me as a kid, as a teenager, she had died. And then having to go into my father's room and wake him up in the middle of the night to share that news. I'll never forget it. It was terrible. And so I had that experience of being in those nursing homes, and it was the typical nursing home. You would walk in, it would smell like urine. And they had everybody in there, people with mental health issues, dementia, schizophrenia. I mean, it was crazy. You had people yelling on one side of the building, and you had people, the typical people sitting there with their heads down in their wheelchairs, drugged up, urine underneath the wheelchair. I mean, it was just terrible. And that place ended up closing its doors, and they've done tore the building down. I even got my master's in human services, specializing in gerontology. That's my diploma. My last 5 years in the military, I've worked on getting my master's degree. I wanted to take advantage of the education benefits. So I was like, what am I going to get my master's degree in? But that aging was still in my head. The aging population, I knew people were living longer, and I thought people with that type of knowledge and training is going to be needed someday. So I got my master's degree in it, gerontology. And then people ask me, Jim, what's gerontology mean? The study of aging, geriatrics, gerontology, aging. Then my father ended up in a nursing home. He ended up in a nursing home. You know, he got lung cancer. Well, it started off with a stroke, heart attack, lung cancer. He had lung cancer surgery, upper and lower lobes of his right lung removed. They couldn't get all the cancer out. Chemotherapy, he didn't set well with him. He was in his, 78 years old, going through a major surgery like that. And he made it through, came home. It bought him some time, but not a lot of time of life. And then he started getting sick and in and out of the hospital, pneumonia. And then he ended up, the last day, he went to the nursing home for skilled nursing to get rehabbed. That was the routine. Leave the hospital, go to rehab, get strong enough to come home. Well, the last time, he didn't come home. This is a picture of him in the rehab. And he's on that bicycle, and his head, sometimes his head would be down, like in this picture here, and he would be pedaling like that with his eyes closed. He gave it his all. He tried and tried. He couldn't stand no more, couldn't walk no more. And we just had to finally make a decision. This rehab, it ain't going. It ain't working. He's not getting any stronger. Cancer moved to his liver. He ended up staying in that nursing home, and you can see how big he is. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to take care of him by myself at home? And he needed a Hoyer lift, that electrical hydraulic lift where they put the strap around the resident and lift them out of bed and drop them in the wheelchair. He needed so much care, pain management. He started getting bed sores. He had to be regularly turned for those bed sores, medications he was on, pain meds he was on. He was getting diarrhea quite a bit. They would clean him up, and then a few minutes later, out it would come again. They have to come and clean him up again. And I'm thinking, how am I going to be able to duplicate that level of care at home? And then COVID hit. And then I couldn't see my father in person. I had to talk to him from outside the window or talk to him on the phone, looking at him outside his window. It was on the first floor, his room. Or the nurse would do FaceTime using her phone. And I could see my dad on the phone and talk to him that way. And it was rough to not be able to visit your loved one. And then he ended up on hospice care. And then I couldn't see him for a big chunk of hospice. And then they allowed me in the nursing home the last week he was alive, that I could actually, they snuck me in through the back door, and I would go into his room, and they closed the door, and I'd spend all day with him. And he lived for 5 days. Just when you think it was going to be the end, he'd pull through, made it another day, made it another day, made it another day. And he lasted like that for a whole week, and then he passed at night. It was around 10 o'clock at night that he passed away. So I'm glad that I at least was able to be there with him those final days of his life. And we got to say what we needed to say to each other, and still makes me want to tear up thinking about it, So I got to experience that nursing home with loved ones and hospice. So I know what it's like. And I talked to many of the residents. And a lot of them were lonely, bored, hungering for connection, someone to talk to them. And I can remember talking to some people. The ladies would hold my hand and just hold it so tight, and would hold it the whole time, or they would rub my hand or hold my arm and just hold it the whole time we were talking, wouldn't let go. Some of their own family didn't even come to visit them. And I remember talking to one lady, my daughter lives in Florida, my son lives in California. Here she is in Ohio. And I asked her, how long has she been in that nursing home? She said she'd been there over 10 years. Lost her home, her property. She said they had to sell all that to pay for her care. Just think of that. You work hard all your life, and then all your assets and retirement and savings goes to the state for your care. Broke my heart. And she kept herself busy. She delivered mail to the residents. She was like the mail person. She was in a wheelchair, but she'd get the mail and go to each room to deliver mail. Gave her something to do, and she also knitted and crocheted and made all kinds of neat little things in her room. Kept herself busy. She stands out, but there's many others that I talked to. Met some interesting people from all kinds of backgrounds. Just impressive. People like you and me, who were serving and doing everything in their community, and then now found themselves in a nursing home. I can speak about it and experienced it. And then having home care for a while for my father and mom, and having to deal with the insurances and all that stuff that comes with being an adult caregiver for a parent, and how the roles reverse. So I understand it. Something some people may not know about nursing homes: many are a broken business. Well, what are you talking about, Jim? Well, they're under little pressure to increase their quality of care. Why? Because the residents have few options. Where else are they going to go? And so they have little options to leave or to find some other place. And so these places can charge more, or they increase the amenities in these places and can charge more. And then the residents have either their insurance, their Medicaid, or it's private pay. So the places are getting what they can get. And then you have some of these facilities can get ripped off by staffing agencies. Remember during COVID, they're trying to staff a lot of these nursing homes. And so these staffing agencies can charge more for these, for example, certified nursing assistants. And so that makes it unprofitable to run some of these facilities. So the average hourly pay for a certified nurse assistant is $20 an hour. Can be as low as $11 an hour. Here in Ohio, entry level for a certified nurse assistant is $18.35. And then insurance companies, they won't pay more. Medicaid has a fixed reimbursement that hasn't adjusted to keep up with the current inflation. And the facilities are already squeezing what they can from the residents. So the majority of these nursing homes, people don't realize, are operating at a loss. And what happens? You got these nursing homes that are operating like that, which makes it an attractive buy for whom? Private equity firms buying up all these nursing homes that are struggling like that. And you read up on these private equity firms, they're buying them up in record numbers. And some say that when private equity firms buy these places up, there's negative consequences to it. You end up having lower quality of care. They say that some nursing homes operated by these firms have worse resident outcomes, including higher rates of preventable hospitalizations and emergency department visits, higher costs, higher Medicare costs, staffing issues, big issue. Research suggests that registered nursing staffing levels can decline as much as 6% in the 2 to 3 years after a real estate investment trust invests in a nursing home. And then they do all these cost-cutting measures for profits. And who suffers? The resident. In regards to the staffing, the Biden administration this year, 2024, April of 2024, they came out with new staffing rule. And it's from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And it's been a controversial set of new regulations intended to increase staffing levels and improve patient care in nursing homes. And it's faced opposition from the industry, of course. It establishes for the first time national minimum staffing requirements for nursing homes that collects taxpayer money through Medicare and Medicaid funding services. Now, this new requirement just came out. I'll post a link for it if you want to read what those requirements are. The staffing requirements will be phased in over the next 2 to 5 years, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has made provisions to grant exemptions for care facilities in rural areas, such as Iowa, where there's a shortage of available caregivers. Isn't that interesting? So there's going to be those exceptions out there. The federal agency has also pledged $75 million to be spent on a national nursing home staffing campaign aimed at increasing the number of nurses working in long-term care facilities. As part of that effort, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services will be providing financial incentives for nurses to work in nursing homes. It's nice that they're addressing it. I hope that this works. I hope, but I'm not holding my breath on it. And I still think that the staffing issue is going to be an issue. Talk to anybody, and even from my observations, staffing and how you see people sitting in their room. They have not been got up. You got somebody, it's lunchtime, and they're still in bed. Somebody, an aide has not helped that person get out of bed, get them dressed. They may have eaten breakfast, but that's about it. And they sit there in their room. Why? Because they're spread thin, and a lot of those certified nurse assistants and aides, they're stretched thin in that place, going from room to room, juggling balls, like that circus act where they're spinning the plates on the wobbly pole, and they're going from room to room, doing their best to take care of people. And I can see how some of those aides can get stressed out and maybe even perhaps take it out on the resident, which leads to you have incidences of abuse going on in those places. And you'll see the hidden camera reports of abuse going on with our older adults in these places. So this is why I share this video, why I made this video, to talk about this stuff so that we're aware of this stuff. And many of you may already be aware of it, but I'm just highlighting it once again. And I think it's important we are aware of what's going on in these places. And also, if you do have to use a facility, stay away from the facilities that are owned by a private equity firm. Find out who's running the place. And I can understand how some families have no choice. I was in that situation. My father was in that situation for my mom, and she ended up in that nursing home and died. And then I was in that situation with the father, and then with COVID. And he was already in a facility being cared for, taken care of. And I was in that between a rock and a hard place and trying to figure out, okay, how can I duplicate the care he's getting at that nursing home here in this home? I even got a hospital bed and was all ready to go, you know. And he ended up just staying there, private pay. And his sister passed away a couple years prior, and he inherited her home. And it was because of the sale of his sister's house is what we paid for his care in that nursing home. That's how we were able to pay it. I tell you what, that was over $7,000 a month, not including supplies. And to write that check out every month, that was a big one. But some families don't have the choice then to put their loved one in a facility because the needs and the care is so great that they're not able to do it at home. But I think we should do the best we can to keep our loved ones at home as best we can. And some families are able to do it and meet the wishes of their loved one to be able to die at home. And so this is a topic we should be talking about. Asking your loved one, what are their wishes in case they ever do need care, end of life care? What do they want? And to have those discussions. And my dad talked a bit about it, and he did tell me, you know, when he said, Junior, when the time comes, I want to be home. I want to die at home. And I still think about that, and I wasn't able to do it. And he ended up dying in that nursing home. And so I think about that, but he wanted to be in his own home. But I mean, I can't beat myself up. And he did. We talked, and he told me. I said to him one day, Dad, I wish I was doing more. And he said, well, you've done more than enough. And he said, I understand if I was home, it would be hard on you. And so he understood it. He understood. So we should have those conversations. And I ran into a book. Actually, it was a Frontline documentary. I'll post it in my description, by Atul Gawande. Being Mortal is the documentary I'll post. He wrote this book, Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End. It's a great documentary if you have the time to watch it, about end-of-life care. And he was a doctor. He talks about how he was trained to be a doctor, but they're not taught, doctors, on how to deal with end of life and how to have a good quality of life. And oftentimes we do more harm to somebody and extend suffering. And so that's what this book was about in that documentary. He says here, medicine has triumphed in modern times, transforming the dangers of childbirth, injury, and disease from harrowing to manageable. But when it comes to the inescapable realities of aging and death, what medicine can do often runs counter to what it should. Through eye-opening research and gripping stories of his own patients and family, Gawande reveals the suffering this dynamic has produced. Nursing homes, devoted above all to safety, battle with residents over the food they are allowed to eat and the choices they are allowed to make. Doctors uncomfortable discussing patients' anxieties about death fall back on false hopes and treatment that are actually shortening lives instead of improving them. And families go along with all of it. Yeah. In his best-selling book, Atul Gawande, a practicing surgeon, has fearlessly revealed the struggles of his profession. Now he examines its ultimate limitations and failures in his own practice as well as others, as life draws to a close and he discovers how we can do better. He follows a hospice nurse on her rounds, a geriatrician in his clinic, and reformers turning nursing homes upside down. He finds people who show us how to have the hard conversations and how to ensure we never sacrifice what people really care about. Riveting, honest, and humane, Being Mortal shows how the ultimate goal is not a good death, but a good life, all the way to the very end. And that's how I'll end it. Have those conversations. Do the best we can to stay out of these places as best we can. Taking care of ourselves, taking care of our loved ones, making sure that they're safe at home, providing the handicap bars in the bathroom, in the shower, elevated toilet seats, removing the rugs, trip hazards, having someone to come visit them routinely, hiring an aide to come and help with activities, clean the house, do the laundry, make meals. I tell you what, that's a heck of a lot cheaper than paying $8,000 a month for nursing home care or more. Taking care of our bodies, staying healthy, getting out, walking, keeping weight down, doing things to stay balanced, to stay strong, muscle strengthening, weight training, light weights, resistance bands, doing things in your home, staying active, keeping your mind sharp, all those things, doing the best we can so that we don't end up in these facilities. Because I tell you, even though, yeah, the Biden administration has come up with that new policy to increase the number of aides in these places and to address the staffing problem, which is great. I still think that it's going to continue to be a problem in the near future as we continue to get older. And something I have to think about myself as I get older. Being a single man, I have to think about what's going to happen to me. Being a veteran, probably if I absolutely need the care, I can't take care of myself, a veterans home, probably a veterans home. And they have some great new facilities now. They're like communities. You got a couple of veterans per home and the nurse on staff. So they've done they're improving the so-called, that used to be institutionalized, they're now more of a home-like environment. And you can have your own private room. And so that would work for me as I get older if I can't take care of myself. And so that's something that I can express to someone if that need arises. But I hope to stay healthy and strong as long as I can and remain independent. And I think that's something we all wish for, our independence, staying independent as long as we can. Something to think about. I share it. Hopefully you got something from it. Thanks again for watching. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. See you on the next one.